Well, welcome everybody to our workshop on legacy giving. Um, if you could mute your microphone, it's helpful because sometimes you forget you're talking or someone's talking to you from the other room. It's just helpful so then I don't have to go running and figuring out who needs to have their microphone muted. That's very helpful to me. So please mute that. Tonight for our legacy giving workshop, we have with us the Reverend Rose Niles, who is our ministry relations officer from the Presbyterian Foundation. And if those of you who are at the February 8th event, um, you'll remember she was there with handouts and getting your attention to say, I'm here to help you. So she's here to help us tonight by uh, sharing with us how to start planning for a legacy giving plan for your church. Um, this workshop is part of the Financial Sustainability Project 2025. If you're not part of that, you can still participate in this workshop, but many of you, I recognize names, knowing that you are from that. Know also that you and your cohort groups meet in March. It will be focused on the questions about legacy giving. And you'll say, oh, not everybody's from our group, but this is being recorded, and I hope to have it up on the website by tomorrow afternoon. So maybe Wednesday at the latest. We'll have it up and available for you, along with all the resources that Rose is going to be mentioning and some other resources. So you can have those, and a email will go out sometime this week, maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. It depends on when I get this uploaded. Just with that this is available and questions that you can use for your cohort groups as you meet this month. The last workshop on financial activity handbook is also online, and as Rose gets started, I will stick that in the chat so you can have a link to it for those who've missed that handbook. And also, I'll put somewhere in the chat a survey from for February 8th. If you participated, if you could just quickly fill out that survey sometime, I'd really appreciate it. Because reminder that this project is like the pre-pilot to the pilot project we're doing in 2026. So what we can learn from what we're doing here will be helpful for that bigger project in 2026 and helping the national office develop a new funding model. So I really appreciate if you do that. But now I'm going to hand this over to Rose.
Thank you so much, Jean. It's truly a joy to be with you all in the Highlands and again to represent you as your ministry relations officer representing the Presbyterian Foundation. And some of you I think I've met, and some of you I visited your churches already, but I'm a free resource. It's part of the total ecosystem of the Presbyterian Foundation. You don't have to pay an honorarium. You don't have to pay travel costs for me to come and do various workshops, including we love to talk about legacy giving. And we love to support you in developing your programs. So some of you probably have had programs in your church. I was talking to someone recently who said a bequest that we got last year really saved us as a church. And what they realized, and what I realized, is that someone planted those seeds, maybe decades beforehand. Some conversations were happening. Some church had an active, their church had an active program at that point in time. And, it really is, there's a scripture that says, Paul plants and I'll probably get it wrong, but Silas waters, but God gets the increase. It's I think I got the names wrong, but one plants, another waters, but God gets the increase. So it's that sort of way with the legacy giving program. I myself have experienced when I left pastoral ministry after 16 years, I went to serve the national headquarters in the theology and worship division, helping to raise funds for our seminaries. And then I went to serve Austin Seminary in Texas. What's a girl from the Bronx doing in Texas? I asked myself. I used to say the X marks the spot. You know, there's an X in the Bronx and there's an X in Texas. So I guess it was meant to be for a season. And I love that season working with Austin Seminary. And I helped them with plan giving, with major gifts, with campaign. But plan giving really captured my heart during that season of my work because there's something we talk about eternal things. We talk about the deepest things that have had meaning in our lives, the things that have brought us the most joy in our lives. It's a beautiful conversation. It's a very intimate conversation, and it's a very special conversation to let people know that there are ways that they can support the things that have mattered to them the most in their lifetime. And for many of us, it's our church. You know, it's the programs in our church that we have loved, that we want to see carried forward into the future, or it's just the church itself that we love, that we want to see carried forth into the future. Or it might be a program of the Mid-Council, or it might be a program of the National Church. There are lots of ways that people think about very deeply what has had the most meaning in my life. And those generally comprise the largest gifts that we will ever make in our lifetime. And so for all of us, it's a very deeply wondrous and marvelous conversation, both internally and it can also be externally, something that we really need thinking and talking partners to work through the best ways to maximize the gifts that we want to make. So that has been part of my journey. And along the way, I may tell you a story or two about the ways in which my heart was really moved and touched in those conversations. Um, would love to be able to invite you all to, unmute and share a little bit of your story. But we all have a story, to tell about ways in which our lives have been impacted by the generosity of others. But I do want to ask you to do a little exercise, if you would go to the chat, and just put in a couple words about what has brought you. We're going to do this. What do we call this? We call this a kind of a chat explosion or a chat, cascade. So don't press send yet. Just type in these words that will express the thing in your church that brings you the most joy. For some of you, it might be youth ministry. For some of you, it might be amazing music ministry. For some of you, it might be the moment that you experience deep and truly healing pastoral care. We all have those things, the things that we really love about our church that bring us joy. So, and I think that every conversation about giving and generosity really needs to touch on that aspect of what we love about our church and the joy that we find in our church. So, if you wouldn't mind putting into the chat, and I'll do it myself as well. Just get ready and type in a couple words that will express what you really find joy in about the mission and ministry of your church. Just type it in, and then once everybody's put something in, we'll all hit send together, and then it'll kind of burst into being this expression of who we are as a community gathered. So we can read it and we can be refreshed by it. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. Let's hit send. Enter. Okay. I see mission work, pastoral care and mission projects, worship, music, and mission, fellowship, community work together, the community garden, people connecting in deep and spiritual ways and music, singing, pastor sermons, the caring and commitment among the members of the congregation, generosity, fun worship, relationships, feeding hungry people, deep conversations, sermonizing with reflective congregants, outreach, welcome, working together, absolute support when needed, working with youth, potlucks, medical equipment, doing work together, one-on-one conversations, choir, small groups, and sermons. Wow, what a great set of joys. What an amazing set of celebrations. And as an outgrowth of those things that are in our hearts, let us take a moment of prayer together. Let us pray. Holy and merciful God, we celebrate the amazing joys that we have found in the beloved community of the church. And we ask, Lord God, that you would help us in this time of reflection on how we can begin to lay a foundation for sustainability and for legacies to spring forth that will allow these joys to continue to grow and blossom and expand. Be with us this night. Take over all of our concerns, though they may really be tremendous distractions in our spirit. Take them over, Lord God. Give us a circle of peace where we can reflect and learn and grow and adapt to the changing circumstances, both of the church and the world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, thank you for that. It's a joy to begin in such a wonderful way and share our joys together. I'm going to share my screen and share a PowerPoint, and hopefully you can see that. I'll go to slideshow from the beginning, and I hope everybody can see that. So I like to start with a paraphrase version of Luke 6:38 from the Message by Eugene Peterson. Give away your life, you'll find life given back, but not merely given back with bonus and blessing. Giving, not getting is the way. Generosity begets generosity. And this conversation about legacy, is just like the conversation about annual giving, or a conversation about major gifts, or a conversation about capital campaigns or other kinds of campaigns to fulfill a vision that you have, an innovative vision in your church. It just comes out of a different pocket of our resources. Legacy giving is, as I said before, the largest and in some ways the most aligned with a person's values and meaning, but all the gifts that we give are aligned with our values and our meaning. It's just that we say that the annual fund gifts that we give come out of our annual salary. The major gifts that we give come out of accumulated assets, some portion of that. But a legacy gift tends to be when we realize that we will no longer need all that we have accumulated. And we decide, where will those gifts go? You know, how can we support the things that have had the greatest meaning to us in our lives? Even here, generosity begets generosity. The Presbyterian Foundation is one of the 5 agencies. You'll see this diagram hasn't been changed. You know, it still reflects the mission agency being separate from the Office of the General Assembly. But we are one of the 5 agencies of the National Church. We go back to 1799 as the original Board of Trustees, and we have been helping to steward assets and legacies for mission since 1821, when the first president of that first Board of Trustees left his 2 houses to establish a permanent endowment fund, because he wanted to ensure that there would be Christian reading materials in places that didn't have them. And over 200 years later, we're still sending out resources annually to support what he wanted to have happen. And that is his legacy. His name is Elias Boudinot. That is the legacy of Elias Boudinot, and it continues to have impact 200 years later through the foundation's work. And we've added 8,000 other funds, and we sent out over $100 million last year, and the permanent endowment fund of the Presbyterian Church that's administered by the foundation sits at over $1 billion. And we're able to fulfill the intention of the donors through that. And that's the key idea here. You want to fulfill the intention of your donors. I've already talked about that. We have a great website. The website will, if you look, it has all of the categories that will reflect many of the things that I'm talking about. Plain giving tools down on the left-hand column on the list, wills and legacy giving, lots of resources that you can search for on our website. And this is my contact information. You'll get the PDF, as well as this recording, so you'll know how to be in touch with me. And this is an overview of the various workshops that I offer. I want to, just to begin with, see if I can get us to this website here. Well, it's kind of a boots and suspender idea because it's not working too well. I will stop sharing this. And I will see if I can bring up something else and share it that way. Let's see if this works. Good, that worked. Hallelujah. Everybody say hallelujah. Even muted, say hallelujah. The technology works. I have taken you into the Stewardship Navigator tool that we developed and make available to congregations for free. And within, the stewardship piece of this has kits for all of your stewardship needs. It has annual campaign resources, different kinds of campaigns. It has stewardship calendars. It has helped to develop a narrative budget and a year-round stewardship campaign, all the good stuff for stewardship. But there's also, as you see here, well, this is how you can also contact me very easily. But there's a plan giving resource, a free plan giving resource that we make available to our congregations. And so here you can build your program, you can make brochures, you can build a plan giving website, there's a resource library, and these are categories down here for building your program, for communicating to your congregation, and for expanding your program. And those are the basic topics that we're going to cover tonight. And I will be kind of going back and forth a little bit to the website to show you the resources that you can find here. We're going to be discussing under Build Your Program, having a vision, having a charter, policies, building a team or a committee, and lots of resources that are embedded here. Sample policies, sample language for your vision statement, and those sorts of things, as well as we'll take a look at the various tools that are available under these different headings. So if you're not familiar with Stewardship Navigator, it is a one-stop resource that really seriously can help you build the program that you want to build. It's just one resource. We also have a kind of a kit. It says here, download the manual, Legacy of a Lifetime. In the rather long PowerPoint that I have for you, you'll see that I actually cut and paste out the month-by-month instructional guide to kind of what do you do in month 1 when you're trying to build a program? What do you do in month 2? But you find all of that in this manual called Legacy of a Lifetime. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to By the way, put your questions in the chat all the way through here. If I say anything that raises questions for you, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and there'll be plenty of time for me to address them. Just double check that there's not already a question in the chat. I don't see one yet. Right, I'm going to go back to sharing the PowerPoint now. Are any of you surprised to know about Stewardship Navigator? Were you familiar with it as a tool? And did you know it had a plan giving? Well, I can't see everybody now, but you know. Anyway, let's go to the beginning of the actual content here. We're going to start, as I say, talking about what are the sort of chapters of the presentation tonight. They're the overview, the build that you saw in the Stewardship Navigator and the Plan Giving Navigator, the communicate. Well, you've got to build the program, which means you've got to spend some time constructing it, planning it, equipping it, having a team that's going to lead it. We'll talk about all those different dimensions. You also have to then communicate with your congregation. You have to spend time helping the congregation to understand this program that you've created. And then once you've done that, you can begin to kind of do additional things that will expand, or really you can evaluate, I think, some of these things that are in the expand category, you'll already have as part of your program. But then you can evaluate them and decide if they need to be simpler or if they need to be more elaborate. And in light of that, I'll be talking about different levels for different congregations. But first, I want to do the overview piece, which is why legacy giving. Right now, trillions of dollars are changing hands generationally. And all of our colleges know this. All of our seminaries know this. All of our universities know this. All of our nonprofits know this. And they are working hard to create relationships and materials that ask people to consider including their organization, their institution, their mission. They're talking about the impact of their mission in such a way that they get a relationship with us as Presbyterians. One of the things we know is that generous people are giving just about what they have always given, but they're giving it to more different causes, and so other organizations are having a conversation that quite often we are not sustainably having in our churches. It really is about the reality that so for example, when I served in Austin Seminary, development officers throughout our seminary world would be jealous of our churches because we have people who truly love the church, and they are aware that love for an organization is something they have to work really hard for as the seminaries. They've got to really reach out, they've got to develop relationships, they've got to find out what people's passion is, what their interest is. And we have got all of those pieces already in place in many ways in our churches. And so we're missing out on a generational shift of resources because we're not necessarily sustaining and having those conversations. And as I said earlier, where those conversations take place, people see that as a blessing. This is what I also learned when I was serving as a development officer. I might have been reticent in the beginning and worried that somehow bringing up this topic would be an intrusion. But for people who loved the seminary or loved a particular aspect of the seminary and who were in a place in their life where they were beginning to consider these questions, it was actually taken as a tremendous blessing and a tremendous gift to be a conversation partner with them. And so it's really about that sense of how our deep joy and the need or the alignment of our values come together. That's that sweet place. That's that very beautiful and sweet place. And I was asked once in doing this kind of workshop, well, what about if you have 12 children? What then? You know, and I said, well, if I had 12 children, I would really want to make sure that they knew what I valued in my life. You know, I would want to demonstrate to them the importance of setting something aside, just as I always set aside my tithe and my pledge to my church in my lifetime. I would want to be a witness in eternity for them, that I was loving them, but I was also loving and showing them generosity and investment in their lives, but I was also showing them my value system, what I had cared about the most in my life. And that is that sort of made the room go quiet, you know, in the face of that challenging question. And I had the opportunity, I told you I might tell a story or two here or there, but at Austin Seminary, I had the opportunity to work with a beloved couple, and they were so full of joy and loved the seminary so much, that you know they just brought me to tears when they shared their decision to bless and create several different scholarship funds. And their children and their grandchildren were so delighted to celebrate all the different causes that they had loved in their lifetime. And that reflected a kind of faith transmittal as well as love that actually in the assisted living place where they lived, they were like marveled over for all the love that their family showed them, you know, in so many different ways. And so I do think that there's a sense in which when we get this right, it is nothing but joy and nothing but light and nothing but positive. And I've seen examples of that. And I've also seen the opposite as a pastor, by the way. I've seen I've seen the toxicity that can take place in families as a pastor, and we don't want that. We want clarity, communication, and to make sure that everything is aligned with our values. A report that's done out of the Indiana University and the Lilly Foundation called Giving USA tells us that in 2023, $557.16 billion were given to charitable causes. And of that, 42.68 billion went to bequests. And bequests was the only category of giving, which includes individual giving, foundation giving, corporate giving. Bequest giving was the only type of giving that increased. All the rest went down some in 2023. One of the things we know is that 1 in 3 congregations, on average, in a particular year, receives a bequest. We know this from the statistical reporting that we receive. And we know, and here I'm talking about Presbyterian churches. We also know that it tends to be the same churches year after year that get the bequests. So one of the things we understand is that those tend to be the churches that are comfortable holding the conversation and have been comfortable creating ways in which they invite people into the conversation. We've already done our joy report, but I wish we had time to do it again because it's so much fun. But so the second chapter after the overview, maybe I should take a break and just stop sharing for a minute and see you all and say, do you have any questions or feedback based on what I've said thus far in terms of the overview? There's a certain amount of urgency for churches to move ahead and create these legacy programs, because if you don't hold the conversation, people assume or get pulled into other conversations with their college, with their university, with other nonprofits, And they assume the church isn't interested in receiving these kinds of gifts. Any thoughts on your part or questions? Okay. I'm going to assume that this means you're ready for me to keep going. So, what does it mean to build a legacy program in your church? Uh, you want to be preparing to invite, to receive, to manage, to distribute, to do great ministry with, and to tell the impact of plan gifts. So that's a lot. Here I want to talk about the idea that it is in the Plan Giving Navigator that I showed you. That navigator was constructed for what we might call a basic program. It has all the tools that will help you set up a fairly basic program. But we want churches to think about how to right size their program. You may borrow a more advanced strategy that you think would fit your church. But how do you know what's the right size between a basic program, an intermediate program, and an advanced program for your church? Frankly, I think the simplest program that is extended over the longest period, and you keep the conversation alive for, say, 10 years, as opposed to burning yourself out trying to do everything, and everybody gets exhausted and loses energy for it after a year or two, would be better. But generally speaking, we measure kind of what's the right size based on membership. The median church, Presbyterian church, is about 68 members. So 1 to 68 plus, heading on up through 100 or so, is the basic size that we would recommend. 200 and over or 150 and over, something like that, is the intermediate size. And 1,500 and larger is advanced. It needs to be a more complex structure. In terms of another way to look at it is in terms of how many people can you find to be part of your team, a team that's going to lead this structure. Can you just find one committed person? One committed person, one committed person can lead a basic program. You know? And you really need the basics in place before you add the bells and whistles at the intermediate level, the advanced level. They build on each other. But so an intermediate program should have at least three, and advanced program needs over, 8 plus. You're going to have people that have very dedicated roles to certain tasks in your advanced program. Hours per month, we think a basic program, now this may not be when you're building it, when you're building it, it may require more intensive investment of time and energy and communication. But we think that a basic program, 1 hour a month can really get you where you need to be. 8 hours a month for intermediate and 15 hours a month for advanced. So these are the kinds of measuring rods or sticks that we would use. But yeah, and let me say here that there is no one size fits all with this. And it would be a lonely task for one person, right? So even though we say one person can do it, I think it'd be better to do it with a friend. So it'd be better to find a friend, two passionate people. I know a church that started this back 40 years ago. This is again another story that I often share. Over 40 years ago, they got a gift of $30,000. So in the 1980s, they got a gift of $30,000 out of the blue. The person wasn't a member of their church, and he liked two churches in town. And one of the churches decided they needed a new, beautiful copper roof. So they spent all the money immediately. Um, the other church, our Presbyterian church in this town, had two people who decided that they would recommend that they set that money aside to begin an endowment fund. And that this first item in their endowment would be dedicated to mission outside of the walls of the church. Because after all, the man wasn't a member of their church who gave them the money. So they said, let us focus on this piece on mission outside of the walls of the church, tell the stories of what we're doing, and then invite people to add their own endowments to it. And so they started out, they invested through the mutual fund family with the foundation, but no investment will grow the way their money grew. They added additional gifts over these 40 years of, say, another 30 or 30, over 30 endowed funds. And the money also grew, obviously, through sound investment. Um, so I visited them a few years ago and they had $5 million in their endowment. And that allows them to have the runway to do what all churches have to do now, which is to think about how to adjust to the changes in our world. And that's what they're doing. So this idea of a basic program, these are the elements we'll be talking about. Having a vision and sharing a vision for your legacy fund, creating a charter, and we'll talk about that a charter is not really all that basic. It can be quite elaborate. But you need to find a way to authorize this enterprise. And so you need to find a way to describe it and to have your session establish it, you know. So you need to begin with some language about chartering this new entity in the life of the church, this program. And then you need policies, and we have in the Plan Giving Navigator, we have sample policies to make it as easy as possible for you to pick up those that language and those policies. And we'll take a look at we're going to click back into Stewardship Navigator and Plan Giving Navigator, take a look at that. There are additional resources. We give you the 10 best ways to promote your program. We give you that document, which is a manual, step by step. We give you touchstones, we give you calendars, we give you resources. The team itself, you know, whoever is the team, the active team that's going to continue to give leadership to this project is a critical element. And the pastor's support, the pastor being on board, as well as the session being on board, the pastor being on board, and the team working together. And then the idea of a legacy circle, we think is part of this basic program. So the vision is, you know, I'm going to quickly go through each of these and then we'll go back to Stewardship Navigator and take a look at the resources that are there in each of these categories. The vision is the why. Everything needs a why. Some years ago, a man named Simon Sinek, who's a leadership, you know, consultant guru, I think he was at Harvard, you know, did a little TED Talk called, you know, the why of great companies and great movements, you know, and he says all the great movements and the great companies don't begin by telling you what they do, they tell you why they do it. And so you need to begin with a sense of purpose and inspiration. And so we say there should be a vision statement that is developed, you start with a vision statement as to why you find it important to develop resources for the future of your church, the sustainability, the future, the vision of your church. A charter in some form. And so, as I said, these can be quite elaborate. It can be a page or two that kind of lays out the structure of why you're launching this program and what it's going to be and who's going to run it and how it's going to be managed. And some of that is also in your policies. But having a chartering document kind of is part of a ceremonial launching of your program. And it's probably more of an intermediate level piece, except when I stopped and I thought about it, you need something like that, even if it's an action of session. You need to have a chartering action, that puts in place why this is important and can be very transparent and people can see it and who's going to be managing it. It could be the session itself that's managing it in a basic program. Or it could be this team or this committee. But someone needs to be willing to take on doing the work of building it and then running the communications to the congregation. So I think the key idea with policies is transparency. The 12-step model says we're as sick as our secrets. And I've seen this in the life of churches. And there's a certain self-fulfilling prophecy in donor relations and donor ethics. We need to have trust and we need to have transparency. Did I put trust here? I did. Sometimes with these slides, they don't show you everything you thought about. And trust is key. Transparency and trust are key. So a big part of policies is knowing what the church has said it is going to do with the legacy funds. It is not a good idea necessarily to just have a rainy day fund. It is a better idea. It's also not a great idea to just sit on a large amount of resources in these funds. It's a better idea to use them to promote the vision and the mission of the church and tell your impact stories, because then people will be drawn to want to add to those resources. And the more transparency there is, the more trust there is, the more you reinforce that if someone gives you a restricted gift, you will honor the restrictions of the gift. If someone gives you an unrestricted gift, you'll also do your best to understand, kind of the spirit that person had and try to, embody it as much as possible, or just be as good a stewards as you possibly can in the spirit of transparency, in the spirit of building trust. That's really what good policies do. Oftentimes people feel these policies are too legalistic or too onerous, but good policies keep us in good stead with donors who are looking to assess and in their process of making these largest gifts that any of us will ever make in our lifetime. Where can I go? So I know of church, at least, I've heard stories and seen the tragic consequences of churches deciding, well, and we know that they gave us it for that, but we really need it for this. And the wheels then turn in people's heads when they're considering whether or not they should make their gift, So there is a self-fulfilling prophecy of not receiving gifts if you don't follow your own policies. The team, as I say, needs to be the right size for your church. It needs to be willing, obviously you want to look for people in your congregation who either themselves have made the decision, or they are quite generous, or they are interested, or they have worked in the development field. You know, you look for people that have an understanding of these areas, um, uh, and who are well respected and well trusted in the life of the congregation and comfortable being confidants and holding confidential conversations with people. Because the team will include your pastor, whether or not they're at every meeting. It'll include some of your session members as well, who are enthusiastic leaders in this process and have willing to go ahead and say, we've made this decision and we'll tell our story. Um, but you know, I heard our vice president for Plan Giving, Carl Madison, say this, and I really believe it's true. You can have a very simple team. Those two people that stayed focused over 40 years in the life of their church, helped the church. And they have very simple mechanisms in place, nothing very elaborate. They worked with us in the foundation. They brought us in to do presentations. Um, Longevity is really what we think is the key. Keep it as simple as you need to so that you don't get exhausted, so that you don't get burned out, so that you can ensure that there's also a transmittal. Not everybody can have the same people serving for 40 years, but you need to have a way that you can um, pass the baton effectively to a new group, or a new leader, and ensure that they receive all the training, all the knowledge, all the information that they need in order to pick it up and carry it forward. With a legacy circle, that can be named in a way that is, I visited a church that named theirs in honor of a very generous, beloved member of the congregation. Or it can be a famous Presbyterian. Some people like the Witherspoon Society idea. Or whatever it is that you would want to, whatever it is that you would want to name your legacy circle. A legacy circle serves the purpose of kind of anchoring that you're going to have an event or two a year, for your legacy group. It doesn't have to be exclusionary. Some people have a very bad taste in their mouth because, people give pins at different levels in their college or their university or whatever it is. And we don't have to do it like that. But once you establish a legacy circle, you're really encouraging people to tell you that they have included the church in their estate plan. And that's a way that you can nurture and steward their relationship. And you can have several events that not only include your legacy givers, but your whole church, but you can find ways to, really thank the people and continue the conversation with the people who have shared with you that you are part of their legacy and that deeply in their heart. The worst thing you can do, I had a friend who um, took a institution we both loved out of her will because she was like, I told them they were in my will and then I never heard from them again. you know so I mean it is heartbreaking when you hear something like that because none of us want to be the cause of that kind of um, uh, feeling that people have. So it is important if we establish these kinds of things that we find ways to acknowledge and thank and continue to steward the relationship over a lifetime. All right, I said I would go back to the um, navigator, but I thought I would pause here and say I've been saying a lot of stuff. Anybody have any questions? I guess I should go to chat. Seeing any questions? No, thank you. Thank you, Jane, for putting in links. Um, Somebody said, just trying to think about how to roll this out. After you kind of build your program, then you think about having a launch event. And you can invite me. Oftentimes churches invite me to come preach or lead a workshop that day. Or one church had so much fun with it. They had somebody playing the American Songbook, and they had a plated luncheon, and they had previously talked among themselves and found people who were willing to give testimonials about their decision to support the church in this way. So they had a couple people, and they also had quotes from people in table tents on the table. And and they had door prizes. Okay, they had door prizes. They really turned it into a super fun event. And several people came up to me personally afterwards and said, "I'm so glad this happened because I've realized I have to start thinking about this." And I wouldn't necessarily have thought about the church. So until Scripture has a saying, ye have not because ye ask not. And the asking is not a hard ask necessarily. It's a conversation, it's invitation to a conversation and testimonial. Does the Navigator provide resources on how to advertise an existing but stagnant endowment fund? Yes. I mean, it requires when you have an existing but stagnant fund, it requires that you do all the things that I've been talking about. You've got to build in the way that we've been talking about it. Let me go back and share the Navigator. So with Build Your Program, with the vision, you're gonna have vision examples, a number of them that you can borrow language from. As we have been supported by generations who have come before us, we recognize and fulfill our obligation to serve the generations that will come after us, after a kind of a explanation and description of the church. So a short vision statement, you have that, and you have as I scroll down, under Build Your Program. You have examples in each of these. If you open each of these, such as policies, you'll see that you have an investment committee charter, investment policy ideas. This multi-fund management policy, I think, is a great one because it shows you actually elements of sort of a charter in terms of the establishment of the fund, the objectives. Then it outlines your different legacy funds, sets up 3 different ones, a capital facilities fund, a church ministries endowment fund, and a mission and benevolence fund. And it gives you these kind of policies that we say every church needs to create, a spending formula. I mean, it just suggests somewhere between 3 and 7%, based on a 12 previous quarters rolling average. And then it gives you aspects of an investment policy statement. And if you have questions, I'm more than happy to sit down. I mean, that's what I do. We do as MROs, sit down and kind of work you through what would be best, for your particular congregation. Fund policies for restricted funds. Your funds may not be a real endowment. Real endowments are restricted funds. It may be a quasi endowment where the session restricts it in certain ways and says these are the policies that we're going to apply to these funds. But usually, if it's restricted, it's your donor restricted funds form a specific type of endowment. One of the first things you need are donation and gift acceptance policies. I worked with a church in Texas that unfortunately accepted a gas station. and they're probably still figuring out how to clean up the site so that it can be used in some way. So you don't want to accept every gift. So you need to think about having some sort of guidelines for gifts and acceptance policies. So, and we have samples in each of these tabs. You'll find samples that you can utilize to build your program policies. The committee. There's a planned giving committee job description. We all love that. So it gives you an idea of what the committee kind of is signing on to do, and qualifications for membership, and kind of what the relationship is to the session. And that's a very helpful piece that you have under the committee. And go back again. You'll be able to find different sorts of resources as well. And we're going to get into those in the next chapter. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to, let's see, one idea for reigniting legacy program, make giving easy and accessible, provide step-by-step instructions on how to include the church in a will or as a beneficiary. And you can do that by doing something we call, 4 times a year, publish an article that, really unpacks ideas about how to do these things very simply. Or even 12 times a year, put a blurb in your newsletter about different aspects of this. As well as, at least annually have a workshop. I can come. You can find other resources in your community, often that would be happy to come in and have conversations about these things. And as you say, make it as simple as possible for people. Let's see, some suggestions for a name for a legacy circle: Covenant Circle, Faithful Steward Circle, Living Stone Society, Heritage of Faith Circle, the Mustard Seed Society, Light for Generation Circle, or name it after your church. I think they're better than naming after a person. I'm thinking of the way in which the Witherspoon name has a different resonance now. Yeah, I just threw out a name. I'm sorry about that. I wasn't tied to the name. But the particular church, that actually was reactivating their legacy society, it's so tied to the generosity of a particular person in the life of their church, that it has deep resonance for people. You wouldn't want to name it just for anybody, but in their case, this particular person is so outstanding in the history of their church that it really makes sense. And they've started having an annual tea, for the Legacy Society. That you can tell what kind of church it is because they have a tea, for the Legacy Society annually as they've been reactivating it. And it's been working well. Yes, the Legacy Sunday, dedicate a worship service to honor those who have left or pledged a legacy gift. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, I'm going to go back and share again. No, I didn't want to share that one. I want to share this one. And I want to go down to, so we're going to go now to the third chapter, how we communicate to the congregation. So in the summer, we think that every church should have a Plan Giving web page, if at all possible. And you can link it to your Facebook page, or you can link it to your web page. But developing that giving web page, we actually have a tool in the Plan Giving Navigator that will do it for you. You follow the prompts and you enter what you're asked to enter. And if you put everything in and you push the magic button, you'll have a URL for a constructed web page. To me, it's magic, And we have set it up, and I'll guide you through that in a minute. give you a sense of how that works. Um, but in the summer, which you start out and it's a little bit quieter time, build your webpage that shows people what all about legacy giving and ways that they can express their interest in legacy giving. Um, Also, we think that church should have a brochure, and there is a brochure builder in the Plan Giving Navigator that allows you to construct a brochure as well. Um, and we also think that you should sit down. Yeah, if you're one person or you're three people or you're eight people, you should sit down and develop what marketing people call a drip campaign of blurbs. And we have a resource in the Plan Giving Navigator under resources called Touch Points that you can take quotes from. So you can just take the quote from there and say it's blurb number one, it's blurb number two, it's blurb number three, it's blurb number four. Find your quotes, and wherever you may find them, you can probably Google good quotes as well, about legacy giving. And or the best quotes are really quotes from people, saying how their heart has been touched to make this decision. But you accumulate those quotes up front, 12 of them, let's say, one per month. And then you send them out, on a regular schedule. So you don't have to be thinking every month, what am I sending out? You've already planned it. Let's say that's your summer task. Your fall winter task is to take your pledge or your what we call a estimate of giving, oftentimes now, card, and add 2 boxes to it. And one box says, I have already included the church in my estate plan. And the second box says, I want more information about including the church in my estate plan. And you may not get a whole lot of these back with the boxes checked, but every one that you get is precious, and you will follow up with those people, and that is a way that people can share their intention with you. You can then respond with information about your legacy program, if you have established one. And you can also have a conversation with the people who say, I want more information. So that is a key action that you can take in the fall, the winter. In the spring, you want to have a Legacy Sunday, and you want to do 3 things in your Legacy Sunday. You want to preach, you want to have bulletin inserts, and you want to have a minute for legacy. And you may also want to have a event or workshop. Um, and you want to have some testimonials from people, if at all possible, as to why they have made that decision. And I'm going to stop sharing for a minute to see if there's any more ideas or questions in the chat. Or anybody want to share anything or say anything at this point? Any other questions? Anything I've missed? Okay. Well, I'm going to move to the intermediate level.
Rose, you did have a question.
I did have a question.
Yeah, how do memorial funds work with legacy funds? Memorial gifts. Normally memorial gifts are like people have passed and they give it's a gift to the church, a small gift sometimes, kind of thing. So sometimes it's 2 different funds. Maybe I can answer the question. A legacy giving, is a process. Memorial funds are actual funds, and your church should have a policy on what you do with memorial funds. And then have a policy, as Rosa said, on what happens when there are bequests from an individual or family for gifts. So they're the same, but they're different. But it comes down to policies. So, sorry.
Right. It does come down to policies. And I mean, in a sense, they are the same. You know, a memorial gift, if it's a gift that's given um, to memorialize, you
Right.
know, and that might be part of, you know, kind of what's said. A family might say, give a gift to the church, and those are memorial funds given, you know, to honor that person. You need policies to guide what you're doing with those funds, for sure. And oftentimes churches have a committee for that, you know, for those memorial funds, or they have a special place to place those funds into their reserves. Um, Legacy giving is, as I said before, that moment, and I just turned 63 and I have a daughter and grandchildren, that moment when you start to think about how, you know, what are my values and how do I want to transmit my values, and what beside my loved ones and my family, and sometimes with estate planning considerations, you're depending on your particular situation, you're thinking about where how do I give in a way that is the best for my family, you know, that maximizes my estate planning. And all of that is something that the foundation is well equipped to be in conversation about. But each and every person has to create their own team of resource people. And we're just saying that the church should be in that conversation somewhere, you know, because it has to do with the deepest level of meaning of a person in their lifetime, you know, and what they value the most. And they valued their church all the days of their life, you know. We all have. So we want to be part of that conversation. There's a question here, not specifically legacy. Aren't there also other types of giving that could be of tax benefit to some members today, not only a part of legacy giving that would be seen later? Yes, there are life income gifts, trusts. We have the New Covenant Trust Company that can be involved with those conversations. People can have their own team to think about those issues, so people can get life income today, and then know that their charitable gift will be given to and our resources, our brochures that we have from the foundation lay out those different kinds of gifts and opportunities and explain them. So we have a brochure that talks about how a church prepares, and we also have their program, and we have a brochure that talks about how an individual thinks about charitable giving towards their faith and their church. So we have those resources. As I said, we have a really good website, and you can easily find those brochures, as well as bulletin inserts and other resources. We also have donor advised funds. People are giving now, that's the fastest growing way that people give. Um, and if you're not familiar with donor advised funds, take a look at them, do a little bit of research. They're available through the foundation for as little as $2,500. It's kind of like setting up a family foundation. So you get a tax benefit now for setting up your donor advised fund. And then you can make grants from that donor advised fund. I'm not a tax advisor, by the way. I want to be very clear about that. So you talk to your own tax advisor about these things. But you can make grants towards any nonprofit, and that includes the church. And through the holder of your donor advised fund. And what's cool about that too is you can sit around the kitchen table or the Thanksgiving table with your family and discuss your values. One of my colleagues has 4 children, and he and his wife assign a certain amount from the donor advised fund to each of their children. I'm planning to do that with my grandchildren in the near future. So when they're old enough, they're only 5 and 2 right now, not even 2. But you know, the plan is to establish something like that and discuss values and discuss, you know, how we put the church first. We give the first fruits to the church, and then we also everybody gets a chance to talk about what they want to give and support out of the family fund.
And Rose, we will be having someone from the New Covenant Trust doing a workshop in the near future. That just hasn't been scheduled yet.
Yeah, no, those are my close colleagues. We're meshed together and we support each other. Okay, I want to just quickly review some of the intermediate and advanced level pieces, which takes me back to here. Um, so in addition to the um, in addition to the steps that we suggest for the basic program, what we would suggest adding for the intermediate program are things like this idea of 4 articles a year, where in the spring, the fall, the winter, and the summer, you share an article with your congregation. The first topic might be just what is plan giving? What is legacy giving? And in that is a kind of an embedded ask, for consideration and information about who they can talk to in the congregation, in your team. And oftentimes, sometimes churches include the name, my information as a resource. The ministry relations officer can also be a support and a help and a conversation partner. The second topic might be just gratitude, celebrating, being grateful. We don't thank people enough in our programs, our generosity programs. We need to really, on a regular basis, say thank you in as many different ways as we can. The next one might be impact of past legacies, who are some of those saints that really have made a difference in the life of the church through their legacy gifts. And the joy of a legacy decision, kind of a testimonial might be another article. So, that's kind of topics don't have to be this, but they could be creatively generated. I'd love to be a talking partner in some of that. Um, Another intermediate edition would be a letter of invitation in the spring. Just frankly, send everybody a letter and ask them to consider making a legacy gift. That everybody can do it in some way. It can be done with a small percentage of your life insurance or a small percentage of your IRA. It does not have to be, what I've seen happen recently, which is churches get a $1 million bequest out of the blue, or a $2 million bequest a little while later. These things are happening, but oftentimes we think if I can't do that, I can't do anything. And that's not at all true. Everybody can do, we talk about in the foundation, we talk about giving at a personally significant level. If everybody did that, if everybody gave at a personally significant level, the church would be blessed and able to show the impact of its mission and ministry in so many remarkable ways. And another intermediate action would be being sure that you have clear, welcoming materials for a legacy society if you've established one, and that you do not neglect to send regular communications to your legacy society. And you have thank you materials, and you have a plan for thanking. These are some of the intermediate steps. I think they're really best practices, actually. And once you've kind of established your basic program, you may well want to begin to think about adding these systems and components into place. With the team, as far as the team, an intermediate action is to include and orient your staff and your volunteers and let them know the impact of these gifts. So they're not surprised if somebody calls the office and says, who do I talk to about a plan gift? Your church secretary, your volunteers, all the family ministry staff, your Christian education staff, everybody comes together and gets equipped to know how to refer and what to say. That is an important action that I think probably should happen. Once you've established your basic program, you can start to think, how do we move to these other steps? And maybe you can make a very simple process of doing it that you just include in your basic plan. Another intermediate action, in addition to your spring event, you have a winter workshop with a special speaker, a video. We have videos available on our website. you know, sort of internal lifetime level conversations and gifts that unpack the different ways that people can give. You might show a video, you might bring in a speaker, you might have a book discussion. There are book resources. And this gets Presbyterians very excited. As a Presbyterian, it gets me very excited. We have a book list in the Plan Giving Navigator of books that we recommend, so you might have a book conversation. Did I cover that? Yes, I did. So time is moving along here. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover some of these additional slides. Um, the advanced editions include, have you heard about developing an ethical will? Oftentimes we're only concerned about kind of where does the resources go, where the stuff go, where do the things go. The conversation about communicating our values and how do we communicate our values is a whole conversation, a whole workshop that we actually offer. And you can find other offerings and good books about it and so forth. We think that's one of the advanced editions, as well as really deeply briefing and team building with your sessions. So they too, each of them becomes an agent that fully understands this and fully is equipped to refer or even hold the conversations themselves. For example, in an advanced group, you have a dedicated, perhaps gratitude captain on the team, or you have, and also you have database reporting. You're recording actions in a more sophisticated way. You have endowment. You talk about your endowment, but you also have an annual report for your endowment and a video. And here I should mention that in addition to the basic tools that are in the Plan Giving Navigator, we also have a subscription service where you work closely, and this usually is important for some of the larger churches, maybe intermediate size, and certainly the 1,500 member, 1,000 member churches. They usually want help branding all their materials, ensuring that they have, these tools for, doing an annual report for their endowment, having a video that shows the impact of what their endowment supports. And so that subscription service is really going through it's being retooled. But if you're interested in that, I can certainly make that connection for you to our Vice President, Carl Madison. These are just some, we also have something called the Church Financial Leadership Academy. It is the financial Netflix for all of these topics. So you can find short videos about year-round stewardship, narrative budgets, legacy planning, hey, endowments, hey, and these short videos kind of give you an overview and a feel. You can also share them and create a playlist based on them. So all of these tools, again, these are some screenshots of what we've been looking at. You have your Plan Giving library with all of the resources. I like to include this slide because it kind of shows that there's an ask, learn, and plan, keep the momentum going, tell the story, and it's a cycle. It's an ongoing cycle in all of the different areas of giving in the life of your church. And so once you get your program going, you're going to evaluate it and you're going to share explanations and resources, help to educate different parts of the congregation. These are some slides from some of the presentations that I come in and make. Now, these are the slides that are taken from that manual. So what would you do in month 1? Some of you are engineers. I'm more of a poet. Some of you are engineers and you've been waiting for a step-by-step, kind of, we provided in that manual that you can download, Legacy of a Lifetime. And it's there and it says, what do you do in month 1? And then what do you do in month 2? And what do you do in month 3? And what do you do in month 4? And what do you do in month 5? And, overview of the important elements, and I would just want to leave you with a reminder that, you really need ingredients such as the agreement between the pastor, the session, and your team or your committee. And you get that through developing the charter and the policies and agreeing on them. You need momentum for a multi-year program. And the challenge is really keeping strong momentum, especially the first 12 to 24 months. And then having dedicated people you might pass the baton to, but you've got to pass the baton effectively. So this idea of a multi-year program, a simple, clear message, and your leadership totally being on board. These are the key elements. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I could, we've got 8 minutes left. I could go in and kind of try to show you a little bit more about how the tool, how great, there's a great tool for building your web page, and there's a great tool for building your brochure. Jean, if there's any interest, I'm happy to come back and just lead a run through of those tools, so that people can really get familiar with them.
That's great. There will be a survey going out in a couple of days, and you can add that if you want that to be included. Put it on the survey. Or you can put it in the chat right now or email me. But yes, that would be great. Thanks, Rose.
Yeah, thank you, Jean, for adding all these great ideas. Personal thank you letters, handwritten notes. I once had an 85-year-old woman come into my study when I was pastoring, and she was in tears. And she said, I've been in the church these 85 years, and I've never received a handwritten note from my pastor before. And, handwritten notes are one of the key things, not only pastors, but at a session meeting, bring a stack of handwritten, note cards and spend some time saying thank you to people for whatever, time, talent, treasure, testimony. We do a whole workshop on testimony and telling the stories of impact, public recognition with permission. It always has to be with permission. Some people might want to give you their story anonymously. If, in this new culture, video, pictures, we communicate effectively with different tools, anniversary gratitude notes, yearly thank you to reaffirm their impact, church updates. Yes, telling people how you're using those resources. If it's a rainy day fund that never gets tapped and never gets used, why would people give you more to add to it? There has to be a sense that this is changing lives, it's having an impact, and you want to be telling those stories. There's so many good ideas on how to. There's a little book by a man named Charles Lane called Ask, Thank, Tell. I put it in front of my face. Can you see it? Maybe? Yeah. It's improving your stewardship ministry in your congregation. And literally, he has a whole chapter of great ways to thank people, as well as important ways to ask year round, and also important ways to tell your stories of impact year round. Those are really the key. That's the key to your annual fund generosity. That's the key to your major gift generosity. And it's also the key to your legacy generosity or your, yeah, it's the key. Asking, thanking, and telling the stories of impact. Did I miss any of the questions, Jean?
Oh, I haven't seen any more, no.
Well, I'm happy to, have you unmute and ask something if you'd like at this juncture with our last 5 minutes.
Any questions, comments, or other questions about the program in general that you may want to ask me?
This is a transformative conversation. It really is about joy, as I said from the very beginning. It really is figuring out what people have found the greatest meaning in loving and finding joy in their church and helping them to see. Let me just tell another quick story with this last 5 minutes. I was invited to a church in upstate New York, and it was in February and March, and they're way up there in the snow belt, right? I slid up the road from Middletown, New York, where I live. I slid up the road twice. to do two workshops. The first one, they wanted to focus on younger people in their congregation. They wanted to focus on young families. Because one of the things we know is when people write their will, they hardly ever change it. You know, so you want to start having conversations, with people when they're younger. My own kids, kind of right after they had their first child, told me that they were starting to consider these questions. So we had a workshop, the first workshop I did, and so the clerk of session in the church was running the AV, and so he participated in both of these. The second workshop, a month later, they wanted me to come back and do a more traditional group, or a plan giving. We call it composing a legacy. That's our workshop that we take on the road, composing a legacy. And it talks about the different ways you can do it and the why, and a lot of good conversation and resources. So he ran the AV for both events, and later he approached the pastor. Now, this is the clerk of session of the church. He approached the pastor and said, after sitting through both of these workshops, it suddenly occurred to me, as it never occurred to me before, that my college has no problem asking me for a legacy gift. And I like my college, but I love my church. And so why wouldn't I include my church in my legacy giving planning? It was, unless you have the conversation, you cannot assume that people are going to make that connection. When we hide from the conversation, and that's what scripture says, ye have not because ye ask not. You're on mute, Jean.
Thank you, Rose, for this evening. Like I said, this recording will be on our website. I'm sure we will be hearing more from Rose over this project time. So if you have questions, feel free to contact Rose or contact me. And we look forward to our next workshop and to your cohorts, hearing how your cohort gatherings go. So thank you and blessings, everybody, and have a good rest of the evening.
And remember, I'm available. I'm like the Maytag repair person. I'm available to come to your church.